I'm Dr. Janet Six, Senior Product Manager here at Tom Sawyer Software. And today we're going to take a look at the platform and the different kind of things that you can create with it. So first of all, what is the Perspectives Graph Platform? It is a SDK and low-code development environment where we can create visualization and graph analysis applications. This platform also includes integrated design and preview environments and extensive API libraries for customization. And this platform can be used to quickly create graph visualization and analysis applications. So how do we do that? So the Perspectives platform, first of all, can federate data across many data sources in an enterprise. These data sources can be graph databases, SQL data sources, as well as RDF, or even Excel or text data sources. And once we federate that data together and bring it into our graph model, then we can process the data. We can do transformations, we can apply analysis and filtering, and then we can create applications that have a variety of views. So we may see some graph visualization views, as well as geospatial table views, charts, and so on. So what I'm going to do today is to take us through an example where we're going to build an application from scratch. And we will also have a time later to answer any questions that you may have. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open the Tom Sawyer Perspectives Designer. This is our low code development environment. And as you see here, we're starting with an empty application. So we're going to go in and create a new application. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a module, which means that we're going to connect to a data source and then create some data views for it. Okay, now that we have a space for our data integrator, we need to define which database are we going to connect to. So in today's example, I am going to connect to a Tinkerpop database. So I'm going to come over here to integrators. I'm going to do an add integrator. And you can see here that we work with many different types of data sources. And in fact, you can even federate across many data sources of different types into a single application. But today we're going to use a Tinkerpop database. Okay, and I'm going to type in the location, the type of serializer that we're using. I'm going to test the data source. Our little green check mark means that we were able to access the database. Then I'm going to do a browse. And I'm going to select which graph we're going to work with because graph databases can have several different segments inside it. All right. So we have the data source, and now we need to define the data model. So the first thing that we need to do that is to extract the schema. So we can automatically extract the data in the schema as we are doing here today, or you can manually do that. But today we wanted to show off that functionality that you can create the schema without manually creating it. So we see here that we added 5 model element types to our schema. Let's go take a look. So I'm going to come over here to schema, and I'm going to turn on our interactive schema editor. So there's our elements that we brought in from our graph database, and I'm going to show all of the attributes that are within those elements. So we're going to zoom in here, and we're going to look at this particular part of it. So we see that some of our data is about songs. And in fact, we are connected to a database with many songs and performers and so on. So we can see here the type of attributes that we have for these elements. And again, we didn't have to create any of this. This was automatically done through the schema extraction. So we can, I'm sorry, can we mute out if because I think we have a little background noise from somebody, please. Thank you. All right, so we can work with the schema in this graph interface, or we can work with a tree structure. to see the same elements and work there as well as we're comfortable. Okay. So now let's go back to our integrator. So we have defined which database we're going to connect to, what the schema is. Now it's time to bring data into our graph model. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to grab a little query here from my other page. So what we're going to do here is do an automatic binding by query. So we are going to add a query for our graph database, and all of the appropriate elements will be brought in and put into our data model. So here we're going to do a simple gremlin query. We're going to bring in 75 elements, but of course you can do any type of query that you need for your application. So we see down here a preview of the data that we're going to be bringing in. Okay, now we have data in our model. And now we can go ahead and we can make some visualizations. So first, let's make a graph drawing view with all of our data that we've just brought into the model. So I'm going to come over here to our project tree on the left side. The project tree tells us the story of the data and the application that we're building. So we've been working more or less from top to bottom here. We have the schema or the shape of our data we're working with today. We have the data integrator where we brought in the data into our model. And now we're going to come down here to the views and we're going to add those visualizations. So I'm going to highlight views. I'm going to do an add view. I'm going to add a drawing view. And here we get to decide which parts of the model are we going to bring into this particular visualization. In our example today, we're just going to bring in all of the nodes and all of the edges that we currently have in our model. But you may not want to do that for more advanced applications. So as you can see here, the capabilities are here to bring in only parts of the model into a particular visualization. So you can focus on the part of the data that you need. Okay, now this is where we're going to define what we're going to do with those elements in the model. So in this case, if we have a node in our model, we want to have a node in our drawing view. So I'm going to select action and then structural, and I'm going to say node. So again, what we're saying here, we have a node in the model. We want to have a node in our visualization. So here's where we are going to tell perspectives, where is that model element and what exactly is it we're putting into our drawing view. So we have our way to identify a node element in our graph model. And we're going to bring it in with the defaults. Now we're going to do the same thing with the edges. Okay, so we're going to do an action, structural, add edge. And again, we're just saying this is the part of the model to go to, bring that element into the drawing. Okay, good. Now we're going to do just a little bit of configuration on our layout. So here is where we get to set the properties of the graph visualization. So I'm going to come over here to edit. And in today's case, I want to apply an orthogonal layout when the application is opened. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to choose, let's start with an orthogonal layout. And we'll take a look at that in a moment and talk about what an orthogonal layout is. One of the benefits of working with perspectives is that there are many customizations available, so you can tailor your application for your particular use case. And there's many different kinds of settings you can use for our graph visualization algorithms, as well as other algorithms that are available in the platform. So today, I'm going to just change slightly our orthogonal layout settings. And as you see, I'm able to do this with no code. And we're just keeping all of the node sizes the same. I'm going to hit OK. All right. Okay. Now that we have defined which elements are going to be in our graph visualization and which layout style we're going to use by default, let's take a quick look about how to define how the drawing will look. What are the shapes or the colors that we're going to see in our graph visualization, for example? And that is defined over here in the graph template. So we're going to look at the default node template. Again, what kind of color or shape are we going to use to represent the nodes in our graph visualization? Let's just change this up a little bit so we can see how easy it is to make these type of changes. So I'm going to change the shape over here to rounded rectangle. As you see here, we have many other shapes available to you. We can also work with image nodes, or we can work with something that's computed based on the data. But today we're just going to go with a simple rounded rectangle. So I'm going to add a label into the node so we can see what is this node about. So I'm going to come over here to our expression builder. And over here on the left side, you're going to see those same elements that we just saw in the schema editor. So we're looking at the data and we're saying, take this attribute and put that as a node label in the text of our node. So I'm going to say, okay, all right. Okay, now let's change the color. Okay, so we can come over here to select. We can pick one of the node colors here, or we can enter an RGB value or other type of value to define the color. I'm just going to pick a different blue here. Say okay. And also, we're going to change the resizability of this node because we want the whole node name to show. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to do a tight fit and say okay. And then we see a preview here at the bottom of how the node's going to look in our visualization. Okay, so now let's go take a look at our application. So I'm going to do a web preview. And there is our first graph visualization. Okay, now let's go do a little bit more work with this. Okay, now we're going to go over to our integrator and let's say we want to bring in more data. So I'm going to change this one number from 75 to 200, do a little refresh, and do a new web preview. And now you see we have more data. So by changing that one number in the designer, we were able to bring in more data into our application. Okay, so let's go back to designer and add some more data views. So we have our data view, or excuse me, our drawing view here. So I'm going to just minimize that because we've defined that for today. And let's go ahead and add a few more. So I'm going to come over here to views. I'm going to say add view. We're going to add a table view. Okay, so again, we choose which elements from the model do we want to bring into this particular drawing data view. So in this case, I'm just going to bring in just the nodes into our table. So I select that, click OK, and then I'm going to choose all of the available attributes. Again, this is all automatically loaded from that schema that we extracted earlier. So I'm going to click OK. All right, so now our table is defined and ready to go. Let's go add another view first. So I'm going to close that. I'm going to select views. I'm going to say add view, and we are going to add a tree view. Okay, so I'm going to say tree. And again, I'm just going to bring in just the nodes for this view. I'm going to click OK. All right, and we have to make a definition of what we want to show in our tree. So I'm going to click all vertices and get an action. So, again, we get to define if we have an element in the model, what do we want to show in our view? So I'm going to say add a tree node. And the dialog here is going to help me out a little bit to define how we show the listing of nodes in our tree. So I'm going to click the reference here. That'll help us have the correct place to put it in the tree view. And then for the value, I'm going to, again, click on our expression builder. And this is going to define what text are we going to show in our tree for each node. So I wanted to show, again, the name of the item. So I'll double click that. You'll see over here, we have the expression. That's just the attribute that we have for the name in each node. And I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to click OK. Now we have our tree view defined. Now let's do one more before we go back and do another preview. I'm going to click views. I'm going to do an add view. and I'm going to do an inspector. So an inspector is a way to see the details for a particular node. So I'm going to click OK. And again, I'm going to choose just nodes for this view. And I'm going to say include the attributes dynamically. So at runtime, the attributes that we have for a particular node are the ones that we will show in the visualization. So I'm going to click OK. All right, so now we've defined our inspector view. Okay, so coming back over here to the project tree, we see now that we have our 4 data visualization views. Now let's build a dashboard arrangement of those views. So we're going to come over here to view layout. I'm going to click this plus sign and say, add a drawing view to our dashboard. There it is. Let's go in and add those other views now. So I'm going to add in a split panel. I'm going to drag the drawing view over here to the right side because I want the drawing to show on the right side. Over here, I'm going to ask that we put the tree view. Okay, but I don't need the tree view to take up so much of the screen. So I'm going to bring it over here till it's about 25% of the screen. Okay, so let's add in our remaining views. So I want to put the table view down here. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do a vertical split panel. And I'll say, let's put the table in that. Now we have our table view. And let's put the inspector over here. So I'm going to click, do a split panel, and I'm going to add our inspector. Of course, the inspector and the table are taking up a lot of the real estate on our screen. So let's make those smaller. So I'm just going to drag that down again to about that 25%. I'll drag this down and make this line up here. All right, now let's go take a look at our preview. Okay, so now we have our application with all the data and all of the different views. So while we're here, let's just take a look around. So we have our drawing view here, and if we click on a particular node, you'll see that our inspector over here becomes populated with the detailed attributes for that particular node. You can also see that that item is automatically highlighted over here in our table and over here in our tree view as well, because the views are synchronized together. That if you do a selection in one view, you'll see that across all of the views in the application. All right, so let's just take a quick look at our different layouts that we have for this particular set of data. So here we're looking at our orthogonal layout. Then we have symmetric layout, which is going to show natural symmetries in the data. We have bundle layout. And again, this is all the same graph. We're just working with different layouts of them. The bundle layout will intelligently combine edges together so that we can get a more dense and a more large graph in a smaller space. Then we have our circular layout, which is going to highlight natural clusters that occur in the topology of the graph. We have hierarchical, so we can see flows and dependencies in the system. And then we have the orthogonal layout, which is primarily made of horizontal and vertical edges. We can also add a overview to our visualization with any of the layout styles, and we can zoom in to see more details of part of the drawing. All right, so now that we have our application and our dashboard looking good here in the preview, let's get this application ready to deploy to the server. So I'm going to come back over here to the designer, and we're going to click on this button here, Generate Web Application Code. And so over here in this dialog, we're going to see some information about how we're going to build the application and information that's needed for Maven. So here in this case, we are going to specify what our Maven artifact ID is going to be. So I'm just going to call it our webinar example. And then we have our group ID, which will help to specify the Maven artifact coordinates. And then the output folder, where are these generated files going to go? So I'm going to click OK, and it gives us the information that has generated the files for us. So let's go take a look. Okay, so I'm going to come over here and I'm going to open this area here in our Finder. There's that application file that we just built in Designer. And then these are the application files that were just generated that we just did. So we have here a README file that is generated every time that we run that web application code generator. So let me make this a little bit bigger so we can see. So this is going to give us some overall instructions. And then specifically down here, it will tell us how to build the application and get it running. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to highlight this command. And then we're going to come over here to our application folder that we just created. And we're going to open a terminal of that folder. Okay, and let me make this big. And see, I think we can make this one small. All right, so I'm going to enter that Maven command. So we're going to build that application right here in front of our eyes. Okay, good. We have a build success. Let's get this running. So I'm going to come back over here to the README file, which is automatically generated with those file names that we specified in that dialog that we worked with. So let me just grab this command, Java, and we're going to come over here to our terminal. We're going to run that. Okay, there we go. So the application is now running on our local server. So let me come over here. And again, we have the information right here in this README file with what we need to use this application on the local server. So I'm going to grab that URL. Yes, and I'm going to open a browser window. Okay, we're going to enter that command. And I'm just going to enter my name here. We do have authentication capabilities for those that need them, but today we're just using the simple case. And so that preview that we saw before, now it's a real application. We're running our application here on the local server with all of those same capabilities that we saw before. So we went from a few minutes ago having no application to connecting to a data source, creating different views of our data, and then creating a dashboard arrangement of those views. And then we generated the code needed to deploy the application. And now we're running that application on our local server, all within those few minutes. So the generated code that we just created that can be used on a local server like we did here today. You also can deploy into a cloud environment with these files that we created, or you can open those files in any Java integrated development environment to continue development as well. All right. So today we took a very uh, we took a data source and we created from start to finish a application for graph visualization and analysis in a few minutes. We just covered some of the capabilities in the Perspectives platform. And so here in the last few minutes, I wanted to just show just a couple of other things that we can do. So I am going to open, I have this browser page ready to go. So we're looking here just very quickly at a couple of example applications that we built with the Perspectives platform. And so again, we're showing just some of the capabilities that are available in the platform itself. So here we're looking at a microwave antenna network, and we're going to apply some analysis here. So I'm going to do a clustering of the elements in this network. And so you see here how the colors of the nodes just changed. And so what we did with that analysis is that we found things that were topologically close together. So we had a data-driven way to group elements. Okay, now let's say that we wanted to see the backbone of this network. We wanted to see the high-level view of what's going on in this antenna network. So we can take these clusters that we have, and we can do a grouping by cluster. Let's go ahead and do a fresh layout. So again, we have the orthogonal layout, which is predominantly those horizontal and vertical edges. As you see here, everything of the same color is together. I'll zoom in here. Okay, but we don't lose any of the details of what's connected to what, which is one of the things that is special about perspectives. Okay, now let's get to that part where we see the backbone of the network. So I'm going to click, and I'm going to say collapse all. And so now we're going to see the backbone structure of the network, and we can use the different types of layouts, of course, as well. But I'll come back over here to our typical orthogonal. And as we want, we can see the details for a particular cluster interactively or programmatically. Okay. All right. So here I had just a couple other quick examples in the time that we have left. Here is a fraud demo example application that we built. And so we're looking at a set of accounts that are suspicious, and they've had some suspicious transactions. And so we can very quickly apply swim lanes to this particular potential fraud ring. And we can very quickly see which are the accounts, which phone numbers were used. Oh, several of them shared the same phone number. That's unusual. We can see the IP address where they're located and so on. And if we want to, we can load related information in here. So we're going to select this element, this account, and we're going to say load neighbors. And so now we can very quickly see which transactions were associated with this account and where those occurred as well. And you may have seen that the node colors changed. And this is another benefit of perspectives, that we can change the appearance of the nodes as you zoom in and out. So if I zoom in a little bit closer to these elements, you'll see again that more detailed view. Okay, and the last example that I have here today is with our supply chain. And so we're looking here at one particular chain. And let's say that we wanted to do some what if analysis. So let's click this one, and let's say that the factory where this element is made burned down. And so now that element is no longer available. So let's do that little bit of what if analysis. I can come down here to the producing area in our inspector. I can double click, and I can click that to 0 because we no longer have that. And instantly you can see that the visualization updated to show us where are the problems now, what bad happens downstream of this issue that we are simulating in our supply chain. And in fact, if we want, we can just show just the problematic part of the chain. So another interesting question is not only what problems do we have here in this chain, what problems do we have in our entire system? So we're able to take a look at that as well. So with this node highlighted, the one where we have the problem, we can take a look at the related location interactions and find out where was that problem and where are all the problems on our entire network. So I'm going to expand everything. And then we can see here the elements in red, which are having a problem in our system across many different supply chains. So these different example applications that we looked at just now, you can also go in and use these demos as well. They're available on our industries page. Just scroll down a little bit down the page and you'll be able to see all of those example applications that we just looked at, plus more. And so we really appreciate you joining us today for our webinar, so that we were able to show some of the many capabilities of the Perspectives Graph platform. And if you'd like to know more, we'll have a little Q&A here now. You can also go to our website and you can click Get Started Now, and that will put you in contact with somebody from Tom Sawyer so we can talk about your use case and your needs for graph technology more. And then we also do have a YouTube channel with some more in-depth exploration of some of the features.